Great. Today we have alums Ellen Nelson, Rose Jaffe, and Ian Klipa. Special shout out to Rose, who has basically been a part of Bootcamp right from the start. Ian, who I know has visited Bootcamp in the past, and Ellen is brand new to this, but yay, Ellen. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us this evening. I'd like to get us started by having you tell us a bit about who you are and what you're currently doing. And let's kick it off with Ellen.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ellen Nelson. I graduated back in 2013. Right now, I'm just a full-time painter. I'm an artist. I make paintings of my own and have shows and try to sell them, and I'm starting to more and more. And I do murals as well and commissions. So it's kind of a balance of those three things.
Very cool, thank you. And Ian, tell us a bit about you and what you're doing.
Hi everyone. My name is Ian Klipa, and I have a design studio in Detroit called Donut Shop, and we specialize mostly in furniture design and fabrication. So it's me and my partner Jake, and it's just the two of us. And we design and build everything in our little 1,500 square foot workshop. Yep.
And Jake is also an alum, by the way,
Right.
dual degree from art and design and engineering. So we'll get to how you guys put all this together in a little bit because it's a great story. And then Rose, last but not least, tell us a bit about you and what you're doing.
Hey everyone, happy to be back here again. My name is Rose. I graduated in 2011 and I am born and raised in Washington, D.C. I moved back home here and I bounced around a variety of different things. And then I started teaching middle and high school art. And then about 5-ish years ago, I took a little bit of a leap of faith and started my art business. I'd been kind of doing the side hustle and then moved to the full-time thing about 5 years ago. I am a painter mostly. I do murals for a living for the most part, but I also do a lot of printmaking and digital illustration, some ceramics, and some other things in between.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you all very much for being here. When I think of being an independent artist or entrepreneur, I think, whoa, that is going to be tough. What advice do you have for students who are thinking about being an independent artist, designer, entrepreneur? And let's kick it off this time with Ian. What advice do you have?
Um, I guess in my experience, I went for it pretty early on. So out of college, I had a lot of different experiences doing, part-time work and kind of apprenticing under other metal workers in the city. And then as I got more and more comfortable kind of watching how other people did it, I decided to start my own practice. And in a way, there's a part of me sometimes that's like, oh, maybe I should have learned under someone else longer because, I find myself to be a aspiring and still developing designer, fabricator, business person, like all of these things that I have to learn in tandem. But at the same time, I'm happy that I started it young because I think that, what you need to sustain yourself at a younger age and kind of what you're willing to sacrifice is a little bit more in line with like the hustle of starting a business. And then as we've grown and what we've needed to continue to be happy and like live our lives outside of work, it's happened in tandem, which has been nice. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear more about how you and Jake came together about this because I think in some ways not doing it completely alone, doing it with a partner can make a difference. And would you advise students like, okay, if you're going to do this,
Yeah.
maybe have a partner?
I don't know if Rose or Ellen have an opinion on that, but once again, in my experience, I think that you could go either way with that. It's like, if you choose your partner carefully, then I think it can be a really great thing. You know, so the way we started, Jake and I were friends in college. We actually like lived together, and when we were both seniors, we started making things, and specifically we made a coffee table over fall break because the studios were like totally underutilized, and we were like, oh, this will be fun, and got to get in there. And I think that's really where we started making things together, and kind of started formulating this pipe dream of like, wow, if this was our 9 to 5, that would be cool. And then and then I graduated a year before Jake because he had his dual degree in engineering. So I moved to Detroit and started finding, older metalworkers and established metal shops, and learning a lot about, more technical skills, and learning about installations and things like that. And then when Jake graduated, he worked at Chrysler for about 6 months and didn't like it. It wasn't for him. So at that point, we started Donut Shop by essentially just trying to put our portfolios together so that it looked like we'd all collectively done more work than we had at the time. So a little bit of a fake it till you make it scenario. And then we ended up naming it, and then we essentially, once again, just for a photo shoot. And then we were like, oh, well, we should probably, start an LLC. And then we were like, we should probably have a bank account. And then we were like, we should probably quit our other jobs and do this 40 hours a week and start showing up regularly. So it kind of just became more like official as we leaned into it. And working with Jake's been great. It's on one side, it's more mouths to feed when like commissions are low, and there's a little bit of an element of like, okay, we have to really figure this out. But then it's also someone to help navigate through, the difficult times and to celebrate the good times with. So
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for that. Ellen, what advice would you give to students who are thinking, yeah, I want to be an independent studio artist?
Oh, well, there's a few things. Definitely don't take anything for granted. Take advantage of every opportunity to network, to get to know people, form friendships. Because even if you don't, necessarily profit off of a friendship or a relationship, it's great to just have a network of people that you can come to when things are down. So the people are really important, and I would say just be very organized. And so for me, in my situation, my income throughout the year and from year to year really, really fluctuates. So it's important to be really organized, keep good books, and learn budgeting and how to like project maybe, how much you'd be making from year to year. So that stuff is really important. And then just, always remember that, it's easy to forget in when times are really good that, who you are as a person, your value is not measured by how much money you make. And just always kind of keep that in your mind. So, but all in all, it's worth it. It's awesome. I love working for myself and not answering to anybody and being totally free and just having fun.
Very cool. Thank you so much. And Rose, what advice do you have for someone who thinks they want to be independent in this way?
I mean, there's so much advice, but I feel like, I've learned a lot along the way. And I think, each of you will have your own journey in whatever your kind of solopreneur, entrepreneur experience looks like. I think that understanding what kind of life you actually want to live is important. I think that being a freelancer or having your own business totally isn't for everyone, of course. And I think that there's plenty of people that want to show up and go to a job and leave it at the end of the day, and they're like, that's cool, and like, that's awesome. My sister is one of those people. She's like, I don't know how you can do this. But I think that if you really decide that you want to, get your own clients, create your own network, kind of build a business, it's a lot of, there's a lot of control in that, but also you're the one that's doing all of the work. you have to do the work, you find the work. And until you have, you can maybe hire somebody to help you with the books or, assistance, it really is kind of a one-person show. And I think that I love that, but it's, I think that understanding what type of person you are, even when you're in school, I think when I was at Michigan, I was pretty self-directed about what I wanted to do. And I think that I knew that, when I was out of school, I was doing jobs that I was just doing jobs, spending time knowing that I didn't want to do that I just wanted to make art. So I was pretty focused on building a life where I could spend as much time as I could making art. So I really tried to make intentional decisions about what I was doing so that I could move towards that goal of sustaining myself on my art. I think that, what Ian and Ellen said, like, having, whether it's a single collaborator or just other support networks, like, none of us can do this alone. So I think that leveraging, communities, I joined a collective of artists when I got back to DC that I think really helped me. It sort of grounded me in a space that I could really meet a lot of people. So I started showing pretty quickly, which, helped build my name recognition. And then, like Ellen said, I think every relationship that you have, you never know when those relationships will bear fruit. And I think that, it's helpful to be in a city, but you don't necessarily need to be in a big city in order to, sustain yourself. But DC is actually, it's kind of a small town. So each job that I do was a potential reference for another job. People talk to each other. So being professional, all of that stuff is really important. But I think, constantly checking in with yourself about how you want to spend your time and being really clear about that. And knowing that, of course, you might not know as soon as you leave school, but kind of taking note about the different steps you make and like keep checking in and being like, is this where I want to see myself? And, kind of keep correcting and moving hopefully towards what you really want to do.
This is great. You guys are wonderful. You all, in one shape or form, have mentioned the word relationships and/or network. And I don't know if all of you are in touch with people who turn to being independent, being entrepreneurial, solopreneurial. I love that term, Rose. Later in life rather than earlier. But two things happened in the last 10 years or so that had a lot of people really thinking about how to be independent. One was the Great Recession, and then the second one, of course, is the pandemic. Two situations that had a lot of people reevaluating what they want and how they want it. If any of you are in touch with someone older who has made this choice, have you seen that it's any different becoming more independent and entrepreneurial later rather than earlier? And Ian, you actually made a small reference to this already, like, should I have learned more? But I'm wondering, and Ian, we can actually start with you. I'm wondering if in your own network you've seen people do this, and are you seeing that it's really any different doing it later rather than earlier?
I'm trying to think of specific examples. I think one of my big like sources of inspiration was the network of people that I worked with here who were, at the time I was in my early 20s and they were probably in their like 40s or 50s and they had established studios. So I saw evidence of people creating that sort of, doing this sort of work and being able to sustain themselves. I think as much as it was seeing success stories of people being entrepreneurial too, I think it was also growing up in like a house where people didn't necessarily go that route and did work more of a 9 to 5. But, to like Rose's point, where some people are less interested in working all the time and like always thinking about this thing they've created and how they're going to continue to keep it alive. Like some people are totally happy to work a job, understand that that's time that they have to like put in to be compensated, and then they like shut off for the rest of the day. And that's totally valid. And I think if you identify yourself as one or the other kind of person, that's a really great place to start with making a decision one way or the other. But I guess in my experience, like I was surrounded by people who worked for somebody else or worked for like a larger company and then still were just putting so much time and energy and emotion into what they were doing way beyond the regular business hours. And it's just not like necessarily what I wanted for myself. And the nice thing about working for yourself is there's definitely like hard times when everything's not going smoothly and you're like, what the hell am I doing? Like, how are we going to figure this out? How are we going to make it through? But then it only takes one email and like one potential new client to get back on track. And at the end of the day, it's like whether like the good and bad, that's going to happen in life regardless. But when it's your own thing, like you can really take ownership of it. And who's to say that the next day someone's not going to reach out and want something that's like going to change your life, whereas if you're working at a job, you know what to expect growth wise, like, this is the track for a promotion, this is that. So I don't know, it's just like a little bit more exciting to have ownership over the potential of what could be.
Yeah.
For the good or bad.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. So Rose, same type of question. If you've got people in your network who made this choice to be more independent later, do you think there's any real difference? Is there any advantage or disadvantage to waiting?
When you say later, like just later in their careers, like they had sort of a more regular 9 to 5 and then made the shift, or
Yeah,
as opposed to
yeah,
right out of school?
yeah,
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I certainly know people that have, I mean, I know people that have like had kids and like later in their life have like sort of decided to start their art business. I think I know many people that are feeling very disillusioned in their 9 to 5 jobs and are like, listen, like I want to feel creative. I want to start my art business. I've been doing this thing on the side. I'm ready to make it a full time. Like, I think that's a pretty regular narrative that people are feeling. And I think there's also just a lot of young people that are like, listen, I don't want to show up to a job that I don't feel passionate about and that I have a boss that I'm not really into when, I want to make a difference, or, a million other reasons. I think that there's the practical benefit of like leaving school and having a regular job where that there's some type of income, which I think is, wise. I think that, you have to have some type of capital to start a business in any way. So for me, I was really not an option. I worked in restaurants and community centers and like a bunch of weird jobs to just kind of, while I was doing freelance stuff the whole time, like birthday parties, like, I mean, anything, any type of art thing, to just try to build a little bit of a cushion while I was building, my name. Like it takes time to build a network. And I think that it makes sense to have some type of regular income while you're building some type of network that you can then jump off and just exist inside of your network. So I think that it is practical to kind of have some type of stability while you're sort of doing that side hustle. Some people, they don't have to do that, but I think that makes sense. But I think that, what's so great about stamps and like, going to art school in general is that, even though I think there should be more talk of business, I mean, this is fantastic. I think that you also really just learn a lot of creative problem solving that has come, really in handy as I just navigate, being a solopreneur, which is just I run my own business alone at the moment. So that's why I'm a solopreneur. But I think, what's exciting about starting your own business is that there's really no ceiling. And I think that when I was just teaching, I was like, well, I make, $14 an hour, and this is how much I make a week. This is how much I make a month. Whereas when when I'm hustling on my own, it's like you're in the Wild West, and, art is this thing where you can start a business doing any number of things, and it feels very creative. And if you tap into networks, there's tons of people out there doing this type of stuff in any number of creative fields and industries. So I think that, yeah, it's exciting. And I think that once you have a little bit of a stable ground, it's a lot easier to walk around.
Yeah, you actually, bring up the reality of side hustles that I think a lot of people are not completely aware of to keep the lights on in the beginning. The whole idea of, yeah, there's some side hustle things you need to do. So thank you for pointing that out. Ellen, same type of question. When you look at your own network of people who maybe made this choice later, um, do you see any advantage, disadvantage to waiting longer to do this type of thing? What are you seeing? What are you thinking about that?
Okay, so I forgot to mention before, I'm out of Kalamazoo, and in this downtown area, I have a studio building that was an old warehouse. It's been converted into like 80 artist studios. Lots of people there. And several years ago, I kind of started up this artist group within the building just to kind of build community and show our work together, just really casual. But there's a huge range of situations there. There's a lot of artists who started their businesses after they retired from their main jobs, all different stages. And I think the main thing is just how much money they have going into the art business. So if you've worked a whole job and you've retired, obviously it's more of just like a, hey, this is fun, let's do this kind of thing. Or, the longer you've worked at a steady job that isn't art, the more money you have going into art. That being said, there's also a lot of us who, like Rose was saying, you've got to have maybe a side job for a good long while. And it just depends on where people are coming from. Like, I was very, very fortunate. I was able to, after I graduated, move back home with my folks for a couple of years. And I just saved every penny I made, and then kind of use that as a jumping off point. Like, okay, I feel comfortable swimming on my own now. Because I've got all these savings. So, I mean, everybody's circumstances are different, but yeah, it's important to start with a good chunk of money and some sense. And then once you get to that point where you don't have to do all these side hustles, like I'll say just earlier today, I turned down a commission that I just did not want to do. And it felt so good.
That's when you really made it, when you can say, no, thank you.
Yeah.
The nice part about having the three of you is obviously knew all of you while you were students. I was familiar with the art that you were creating at the time, and being able to stay in touch over time and see how you grow and develop. I'm wondering, looking back at the time that you spent at Stamps, how did you use your education or not use your education, as the case may be, at Stamps in terms of what you're doing now? And let's start, actually, Ellen, let's start with you this time.
So yeah, I mean, when I was at Stamps, I actually didn't get to take a lot of painting classes, but that was okay, because I feel like my education at Stamps more taught me how to be an artist rather than like how to perfect my painting. I can do that on my own, but how to have a schedule and the discipline to do it and what to be searching for, and also just the details. So, I mean, I grumbled about it a lot when I was in school, having to take graphic design classes. I was like, this isn't my thing. I don't want to do it. And now, I realized over the years, you've got to be able to design your own business cards, postcards, signage, all that stuff, your website. So, I mean, every little piece is important, and it may not seem like it at the time, but then I really appreciate having to do a little bit of everything now that I need to do a little bit of everything sometimes. So, yeah.
Very cool. All right. And Rose, looking back, how do you or not do you use your time at Stamps?
I mean, gosh, I had such a great time at school. I think that, I wish that there had been more there wasn't much illustration going on when I was at Stamps. I don't know if that's shifted now, but I did an independent study. I basically requested an independent study under a professor that I knew did illustration, because I was like, would you mind just doing this? And that was really fantastic. It helped me. He was like, that's cool, but like, I don't want to have to, do a lot of work keeping track of what you're doing. So that was really helpful to me to kind of like, have to show up and get this work done on my own. I think that, there's so many ways that, being at Stamps, I think served what I'm doing now. I think that it was like a competitive atmosphere, which I think is like arguable if that's good or bad. But I think overall, if you're in the creative industry and you have a business, like it's competitive, and, there's a lot of painters, there's a lot of people making furniture, graphic design, you name it. So thinking about why you stand out, why, if somebody wants a painting, why would they go to you, right? So I think that, like a good work ethic is important. If you're not in the studio perfecting your work or making good craft, then, at the end of the day, you can't really have one thing without the other. If a lot of people know your name, but then your stuff isn't so good, then that's not really going to work. And if you make really great stuff, but nobody knows who you are, then that's also not going to work. So I think that those, being in a group of artists that I respected and wanted to make good art for helped with my work ethic that I think I really carried outside of Michigan. And then I think the last thing is just that kind of creative problem solving, like being in an environment where I, at the time really grumbled about like some of these conceptual classes where I was like, what is, why do I have to think about, this kind of stuff? But I really look back and, there's just all kinds of interesting things you come across when you run your own business, and take a variety of jobs. Like, I do mural jobs, but also like a lot of different things. So I think like there's plenty of things where I'm faking it till I make it. And I think a lot of that comes from, being comfortable outside of my comfort zone, which I think happens a lot, especially for me at Stamps.
And were you 2011?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, some things have changed illustration wise, in terms of visualizing and depicting comics, graphic novels.
Cool.
Yeah, there's some more, I think, opportunities there. But again, there's no majors, so there's never going to be enough of one specific thing. There's always going to be, we make you try things that you won't necessarily want to try. So,
Which I think is really great. And the last thing that I forgot I wanted to say was just that if I could tell myself then, just really utilize the resources at school. I think I really did that when I was there. I was like, I'm going to just hang out in the wood shop and do like plaster and metal and like all these different things. But like, you're going to really miss having access to all of those things when you're just out, you're not going to have a kiln. You're not going to have all the cool things that they have at art school. So I think that, there was years that I was like, oh, I wish I had just done just only this one thing at art school. But then I look back and I'm like, you know what? I'm kind of glad I did like a weird random fiber art class and like sometimes I used a little bit, when you don't expect it. So I would just use the resources while you have them.
oh, that's great. That's great. Ian, looking back, how do you use or maybe not use your time at Stamps?
Yeah, I think there's a lot there, and I would echo a lot of the opinions of Ellen and Rose. But I think specifically for me, uh, I think that if I'm being totally honest with like myself and my experience, that like if you look at the art school and you look at the amount of like requirements to leave 4 years later with a university degree, it's like not one of the most challenging schools in the whole college, unless you choose for it to be and you like choose to push yourself. Like at the end of the day, you can have a bad critique, but like someone's still going to give you a B and be like, all right, well, not my favorite painting, but like next, And if you don't ever push yourself and you don't try new things, and you go with the mindset of like, oh, this is so annoying that like I can't do exactly what I want to do, or like, oh, I'm a painter, but they're making me like weld, then like I think you're probably not in the right program, but you're also missing the bigger picture. And like for me, I went to the art school after being in the LSNA for a year. So I only had 3 years to do the BFA, and had the sophomore review after only being there for like 7 months or 8 months. And that really helped me to understand like the way you think about what you've done. And like I had this totally disjointed, made no sense portfolio, but I like kind of told the review board like how I ended up and like doing this thing, and in a way that gave me a lot of confidence about like self-reflection and pushing yourself and like trying different things. And I think that really carried over into the next few years. I also, you're exposed to different professors, and you have like these more contextual history classes, that you also have, the more literal hands-on kind of mediums that you're trying different things. And I think the benefit of trying new things is like, don't take it so seriously, but try. And if you like something, like put your own time into doing something else with it, and like following that sort of, breadcrumb trail. So yeah, I think so much about the stamps, and I don't know how much the like curriculum has changed, but like it's so much about like kind of choose your own adventure. And like if you want to skip all the steps and not really do that, you can, but like I wouldn't advise it. And I think if you really lean into that, then I don't know, I feel like it worked for me, at least a little bit. So
Yeah, you're putting your finger on something that I think is really helpful for current students to certainly think about, which is an open curriculum like this is what you make of it. That you know, if you want to challenge yourself, you can. If you don't want to challenge yourself, you kind of skate to a certain extent. I mean, obviously, sophomore review kind of filter some things out. And Ian, if I remember, you were a musician as well, right? Am I remembering right? Oh yeah, 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 yeah. So while you were doing all of this art and design stuff, you had this whole other creative sort of world. How did those worlds come together or not come together?
um I think like literally they came together by doing for certain media projects, kind of creating my own like songs, and they're having some sort of familiarity with like video work and how different sort of things can come together. I remember for my like LSNA upper level writing requirement, I somehow found this class that was called like Welcome to Hell. And then instead of writing like a 20-page paper or whatever you're supposed to write, it was all about just like hell in popular culture. I just made like a soundscape of like creepy reverby noises and turned that in. And somehow that was like an acceptable essay. Um, but I think for me, it's like I kind of just view everything as like a master of none, like just try a lot of different things. And like, some days I feel like playing an instrument, and some days I feel like hitting a piece of wood with a hammer. Like it's different. And like having those different outlets, I think they feed into each other in a lot of ways. Like when my partner Jake and I, we do mostly commissioned work, but we're trying to figure out how to add product lines and like expand into different sort of streams of revenue. And like the way I think about the analogy I use about creating our own line of products is like, well, it's like our first album, it's like that first impression, like, what do we want that to sound like? And so I don't know. I don't know if that really answered your question. That was a little bit of a tangent, but
No, 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 no. I think that it's important for creative people to recognize how one form of creativity can definitely feed uh,
well,
another form of creativity.
it's just like I think there's like principles that are about like seeing what you're doing or hearing what you're doing and being like self-critical, not in a negative way, but in like a way that you can grow from that. Or like if you're like making a song, you're like, oh, I'm not good at like many chords. It's like, okay, well, then what can I do with like the chords that I do know? And like, okay, maybe that's an area of improvement. It's like cooking or something, you know? Oh, I don't have these spices available, but what spices like can substitute in? And like it, you know, you just like work with what you have in a way. And there's a lot of crossover in terms of just, yeah, being creative in that way, not in terms of like the context or like the content of what you're making, but just like how you make it.
Yeah, very good. Um, I want to switch tracks just a little bit here. And Rose actually started to put her finger on this already, but um, if you could go back and tell yourself something when you were still a student, Ellen, we'll start with you. What would you tell yourself?
I would say keep that mind open. I was I remember back in even in one of my painting classes, my instructor was, kind of trying to work with me on my color usage. And at the time I was just like, yeah, sure. I know how to use color, fine. And I didn't really truly understand what he was talking about until just a couple of years ago. And it makes I mean, I can see it in my art. It's exciting. But I would say, like I said, mentioned before, I kind of grumbled about having to take the classes I didn't want to take, but I really did have an opportunity there to make some really cool things. And I think some of the times I just didn't take those opportunities, and I wish I had.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hindsight is 2020, and this question obviously is more for the students who are attending. But I also want to point out, coming to the realization of something several years later is still valuable in that the seed was planted. Um, so, as creative people, sometimes we don't get it until maybe we need it. But I love that as an example. Ian, looking back, something that if you could, you would go back and tell yourself.
Um, Switch to the business school. No, I'm just kidding. I don't regret the decisions that I made in college at all. I mean, I guess like in a perfect world, I would be like, Jake and I went back a few years ago and did like a couple class session where we did like intro to a couple specific metalworking processes. And I had a similar reaction where I was like, holy shit, like this, excuse me. Like this, like these facilities are amazing. And they're like even more amazing than when I was there. So a part of me is like, use them more. And I definitely think that. I know that the reality is like, you got other classes and you do have to produce work, and it's creatively exhausting. It's physically exhausting. There's the whole other set of parameters and, challenges right now. But yeah, I mean, I guess I would have, I just wish I would have like produced more work in school and like not taken it so seriously in a way. Like I think I was really competitive with like always trying to like not look like a fool in critique and like have something that I was excited about. But like you don't have to know what your thing is. Like I think I really discovered metalworking specifically, which is what I'm most into now, like in my senior year. So
Yeah.
I think trying to let go of like your preconception of what you are and be a little more open would maybe be something I would try and
Yeah.
do more
So
specifically.
2 points for open so far. Rose, if you could go back, is there anything you would tell yourself? Oh, you got to unmute. Sorry.
It's just telling everybody how much more open minded I wish that I had been. I really do, third that one. I think, gosh, I mean, it's so interesting. Like getting older is, I find to be a great experience. Like I'm just constantly learning about myself. I'm constantly taking notes, sort of self-correcting. I just generally find it an enjoyable process. And there's different times in which I think that, I would have told my younger self different things, but I think in general, you know, be present in your time at Stamps. I think that sort of goes with being open-minded. Like that's such a special moment. I think that, stress, although I think there's an amount of stress that kind of keeps us motivated and moving forward. I think that it's also, I think minding your mental health is very, very important. And I think that when I left Michigan, I was just working kind of around the clock. I was like, had these jobs, and then I would go to my studio all night, and then I was in shows, and then I was trying to take every single little tiny teeny commission that I could get. And it was totally unsustainable. And I was like, but I must, I don't know what, idea that I had to, be, but I think that I realized that I couldn't really show up my best creative self if I wasn't like well rested, if my mind wasn't in the right place. And I really realized that that was such an important part of my creative practice, actually, was really taking care of my mind and my body. So, I started doing a lot more yoga and meditation, and taking time where I was just like in the studio spinning my wheels, and like taking more walks outside, and just like, really understanding that taking time away from the studio or away from, work was like really restorative. And, taking time to kind of just creatively play, all of those things. Like as creative people, we need to like fill our well, and I think in this day and age, there's just a lot of demand to like be creative all the time. And like, I feel like I'm constantly having to churn out these like next huge design that's going to go on like a 4-story building. And I'm like, oh my God, so much pressure to constantly be doing these designs. And so I think that, I would just tell myself to like enjoy, take a deep breath. I really did enjoy myself in school. Let's be real, but don't take everything seriously.
Yeah. That's also a theme I'm hearing from you guys. Don't be too serious. Serious enough, but not too serious. So
Yes, exactly.
yeah, this is great. Um, if, we're gonna run out of time in a little bit, so again, I'll remind people if you have questions, please drop them into the chat. And Rose, as long as we have you at the moment, we've talked about networking quite a bit tonight, and I'd love to get um, your take on resources for networking and what makes for effective networking.
I think that, let's see, I try to think about, like, I want to show up as somebody that I would want somebody else to want to work with me. Okay, let me start that again. I think that, if I meet somebody at an opening, or if somebody introduces me to do some type of commission, I want to show up in a very professional way. And then also, I feel like it's sort of a professional situation from the beginning to the end. And then I also like to sort of sustain those relationships.
Mm.
I know there's like a predominant duo of mural artists in DC, and they're just like, they're total business people really at the end of the day. And I was meeting with them a couple weeks ago, and, they said that every couple of months they just go through their like Rolodex of people, of like all of the many walls that they've done all over the country. And they just message people, hey, how's the family, or like every so often they'll like send flowers to different people, like just kind of constantly, so that you're on top of mind of all these different clients, which I thought was like, oh man, that's next level. But I think, yeah, I was like, that's very organized. They're also so into spreadsheets and being very organized, which I know Ellen mentioned before. And like, you cannot run a business if you're not organized. It's been a tough learning curve for me, but it's so important. But yeah, in general, I think, network is really everything. Like I can't overstate, having a good reputation. And, so many of the jobs I get are just by word of mouth.
Mm.
So I think that, doing consistent good work, following up with people. And then in addition to that, I think also not waiting, for things to really come to you, but really seeking out opportunities, because ultimately, like, the worst thing that people can say is just no. And
Yeah,
so, I asked for all kinds of things, and I've, just gotten a good amount of stuff that way.
very cool. Thank you. Ian, same question. What resources do you use for networking and what makes for effective networking?
Mm-mm-mm. Um, so I think that just generally, it's like a trial and error thing. There's a lot of different approaches you can take, whether it's word of mouth or like if there's events. In Detroit specifically, there's an organization called Design Core that is kind of like an aggregate of a lot of different design professionals. So they'll host events, and you want to like show up to those, and you can cold call people, which is not super fun, but like you can literally do it, and like you'll get sales that way. um, I think that with that trial and error, though, it's like a little bit industry specific, and what you need to do in addition to trying a lot of different things is have a moment of self-reflection and then see like, okay, how did that go? Was it something that like I could have improved upon? Is this just like, am I barking up the wrong tree? Like, let's maybe kind of refocus somewhere else. And I know I'm being a little bit vague here, but it's really just like a work in progress for us. I think that when we first started out, we would go to like every single event, or if there was like pop-ups and things, we'd like go to that. And if there was a fair, like we would apply to be in it. And like we got a little bit cocky at some point, and like we didn't have good experiences at these things, and then we started getting more work, so we just like stopped trying to reach out and be proactive about growing the business, which definitely backfired. And and now we're more direct and forward about it. I would just a couple other points. I think Rose's point about professionalism like definitely resonates. You can tell yourself that you're like the quirky like artist who like has like dirty fingernails and like doesn't coat, like like wears gross clothes, and that's awesome. And I do that too all the time. But like you have to put yourself in the shoes of like the person that is looking at you, and if you're trying to convince them to like spend money on something that you're going to provide, it like on one level they might be like, wow, this person's outfit is very creative. On the other level they might be like, I'm not going to give them X amount of money because I don't, I just don't have a good like gut feeling about that. So finding that balance about how you I think portray yourself, and once again, that's person specific, that's industry specific, that's like whatever makes you feel comfortable. But and then taking a little bit of, I think, emotion out of like the business development side of things. If you don't ask, you're not going to receive. And,
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you want happy customers. And if they are happy, one other thing I'll say is that I remember getting this bit of like advice, and it's like, we don't want happy customers. We want like raving fanatics. You want your customers that you do land to be so stoked on what you've done with them that they're like proactively telling people. And that's like a really, really valuable thing to have. So yeah, once again, I went on a little bit of a tangent, but that's
But Ian,
my
I am
experience.
now going to remember raving fanatics. So that
Yeah, I might have been paraphrasing that, but that was the
yeah,
set,
very
one more thing, actually. We just introduced like a CRM, which I hadn't heard of before, but it's like a customer relationship management. So it's like a software specifically where over the years we have like hundreds of contacts, and you're like, oh, I have never talked to this person again. And you can automate a reminder that like links to all your emails, so you can see in one place like, when's the last time you talked to them, what was that conversation, like, oh, remind me to say hi to them like a year from now or 2 months, whatever.
yeah.
So there's a way to like be smarter about these things too, and be a little bit more efficient too. So anyways.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for the CRM shout out again. Especially, I think if you're an entrepreneur or solopreneur, it's a great way to manage your network and your messaging. So thank you for bringing that up. And Ellen, certainly last but not least. So, what makes for effective networking? What resources do you use for networking?
All right. So for me, it's been mainly about friendships. I'm kind of a, inch wide, mile deep kind of person. And I always figure if I can make friendships with the other artists in my area, and as far as resources, I'm always looking to like local arts councils, and maybe that's not the direction I want to go, but I'll meet someone there who sympathizes and we can do our own thing. That has happened. And just like Ian was saying, over the years you get a sense of what events and stuff are worth your time and what isn't. But while you're exploring that, don't look down on the small things, because you never know. Give everything a shot, give everything a try. And then the last thing I would say is just really remember to keep your brand airtight. How do you want to present yourself? I've got my social media accounts, et cetera, and I never do anything but art. It's all very specific, even to like the way that I dress for my shows. Stick with your brand, know yourself, and really make friendships.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. So Diane, for those of you who haven't looked at the chat, Diane, thank you so much for being here and for giving this great feedback. Because I think you're right. I think mentoring, and finding a mentor is so key, no matter what you want to do. This is a person that you develop a relationship and trust with over time. Um, Trust me, I talk about networking till I'm blue in the face. So if I ever run out of steam, I will definitely call you.
Well, and I have been an entrepreneur.
Cool.
Actually, the woman that I was with today, we did a consulting gig in India together. And people will say about me, I don't collect things, although I have beautiful art in my home. I collect people. And, I could name any number of people at Michigan Medicine. I'm a nurse by background who followed along behind me for many years. The chief nursing officer at Women's and Children's Hospital was my research assistant in the early 90s. I could name lots and lots of people. So you're so smart to be talking about relationships. It's a fine art. My father taught me this. He would say, daughter, because he had 8 of us and we all had a number. Daughter, it never hurts to talk to people. Don't be intimidated. Everybody puts their pants on the same way, one leg at a time. You never know. The woman I was having coffee with today, I'm here because I have an 18-year-old who's arrived from Kenya 5 weeks ago, who has amazing talent and wants to go to art school. And she's working right now, waiting tables. So I told her I'd come to this thing and learn what I could learn. And it's been fabulous. Thank you. But yeah, it's just, you never know who's going to be around the next corner. This woman I was with tonight, she's here from California. She's the chief nursing officer for a big hospital in San Diego. And she has been my mentee for many, many years. But her niece just started undergrad at Michigan. And my darling little 18-year-old that arrived from Kenya, it's like she's hanging out with me, her auntie, and her other white-haired relative, her uncle, and not really having a lot of fun with us, I don't think. But her niece is here, and now we're going to hook the 2 girls up, and she'll get connected to some young people, because she's going to start really at Washington Community College in January, and then try to get into stamps. That's the goal.
Cool. Very cool. Thank you so much for being here, Diane.
Thank you so much for letting me be here. You guys are awesome. I'm so proud of you, and I don't even know you.
So in the couple minutes that we have left, very quickly, last words that you would love to share with the students who are on the call and who will be watching this recording later. Rose, any last words?
I think really think abundantly. The sky is, sorry, it's loud here. The sky is really the limit. You can always pivot, if you're like starting to do this thing, and you want to start doing something else, like making cakes or like doing a totally different creative pursuit, that's totally cool and fine. And I think just stay creative, stay open-minded, make good relationships. And I think a lot of things will fall into place.
Great, great. Ian, last words.
Well, thanks everyone for listening to my ramblings. And I guess I would echo what Rose is saying. I think having an open mind is super important. Nothing's forever. Like everything can be undone for the most part, and you can always switch gears. But when you do decide to do something, I think like really leaning into it and giving it a chance to blossom is important. So you can't kind of put your tail between your legs and quit uh, as soon as the going gets tough. I think that the other point that was made earlier about, I don't think this path is necessarily for everyone, and I don't think that one is better than the other by any means. So I think looking a little bit inward and determining, what makes you happy, because we only get one go around. So really trying to be in tune with yourself and thinking a little critically about that. But yeah,
Great.
thanks everyone.
Thank you. And Ellen,
Yeah, I would say, there's a lots and lots of ups and downs in this career path, but at every point, whether it's high or low, it's important to take a step back and just, wow, I'm blanking. But oh yeah, take a step back and realize, okay, what do I know to be right? And am I doing it or not? And also, the world is literally on fire right now. So figure out how to do what you want to do. It's possible.
yeah,
And as the last thing I would say is, artists are important. Art is important. There is truth and meaning in beauty, and we can't forget that.
yeah, yeah. You all are so wonderful. If students would like to follow up with you, what is the best way for them to be in touch with you?
You can
TikTok.
follow me on Instagram.
Follow you on Instagram, okay.
Email. I do prefer email to get in touch though.
Okay.
And I check email way too often, so probably email.
And just so you know, I have all of their emails, so if you want to be in touch with anyone, please feel free to be in touch with me and I can connect you. Ellen, how do you like to be in touch?
Yeah, for same with Rose. If you're trying to get in touch with me, email is best, but also follow me on Instagram.
All right. So lots of Instagram. Ian, you dropped your email into the chat, but in case anybody needs it, I also have Ian's email.
I would also encourage you to give me a phone call because I think it's a lost art. So go ahead and give me a ring and we can chat.
All right.
Good phone call.
All right. Again, happy Friday to everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And enjoy the weekend.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
You, John. You're the best.
Thanks, John.